Well, I just got a notification that I'm live, so that's a good start. Even though that's just YouTube telling me that, not my personal physician. So in this video, we're going to go over the solutions for the assignments from Chapter 1, which were review questions 1, 2, and 3, and parts A, B, C, D, and E of the mini case. So, review question number 1: what are some of the problems involved in implementing the goal of maximization of shareholder wealth? Um, some of the practical problems of maximizing shareholder wealth is meaning you're getting the value of the firm, the market value of the firm, the common stock at its the highest it can be or should be. Many things affect stock prices. As we will see a little bit coming up in this semester, they talk a lot about cash flows. And when you buy stock, again, you'll see in these videos and some of my other courses, I admit that I still have a few shares of Hershey stock, 90 miles down the road here from Dallas, Pennsylvania. And it's been a sweet stock for me. No pun intended, I guess. Um, what am I buying when I buy? So I have some other stocks too, but I like to use Hershey because it's one of my big winners. Makes me feel good to talk about it. Can I get in the car, go down there, drive an hour and a half, and say, "Hey, that desk is mine or that computer is mine because I'm a shareholder." The assets, belong to the corporation, but I own the corporation, so I have claim on those assets. Now, really, what you're doing when you buy stock in a corporation, and you're buying what those assets can do in the future, the cash flows they can generate in the form of revenues to grow the company. Okay, think of it as a beach ball, and you put air in it; it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what you want the business to do. Yes, it pays dividends. And we'll talk about that later this semester. Dividends are cash flows, returning cash to usually cash or other assets to owners as a return on their investment. And we'll talk about that at the end of the chapter too, whether companies should have, what their dividend policy should be. Um, but different investors have different goals: short term, mid term, long term. And again, do you want, older people like myself should be in what they call fixed income investments, something that is helping me pay my bills and cope with inflation, as opposed to looking to build long term wealth. My long term and your long term is different because of the difference in our ages. Um, so usually the stock price will reflect, and one of the principles we have is that the markets are generally right. And one of our five principles that form the foundation of finance. So when you see the price of the stock going up, it's usually because they're reporting good earnings, and the consensus among investors and market watchers are that management is doing a good job getting that company positioned for the future. Okay. But there are other things that affect the market too. Government policy, war between Russia and Ukraine, say, uh, inflation. Uh, there's our friends, the economists. I get a kick out of them because they talk, break things down, and they talk on a much higher level than I can comprehend often, except for my favorite one who passed away a few years ago, Dr. Walter E. Williams. Um, and Henry Ford, um, the guy from Omaha, from the Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, uh, Steve Jobs had one thing in common: they didn't like dividends. Dividends. Why give assets to shareholders? Shareholders gave assets to the company. They invested in the company to grow the company and to uh, get the company bigger. Okay. Going back to Hershey, I think last time I checked, it pays about $2.75 a share in dividends. Uh, it goes up more than $2.75 in market price each year. I bought it for 45. It's the last time I checked, it was around 200. I haven't checked it in a while since the market nosedived the last 3 months. But that's where you build the wealth in capital gains. Okay, but there are other factors, geopolitical factors, inflationary pressures, government policies. What if your company that you're invested in is a pharmaceutical company and the FDA bans one of their major drugs because of unknown side effect when it was approved? There goes the revenue stream, there goes the cash flows, and the stock price is going to nosedive. So there's uncertainty whenever you invest. The investments can give you positive return, can stay even, or it can give you a negative return. You can lose money. I talk about Hershey. I've made money. There are a couple that I've lost money on also. Okay. Managers, investors have different time horizons, different risk preferences. We have that other fundamental principle, risk and reward. The bigger risk you take, you should be rewarded more for taking more risk. It's commensurate. Again, you people can afford to take more risk than I can because you have a longer time horizon for your investments. On the other hand, on the other side of the coin, I could say I'm in a better position financially. I don't know your positions, that I can afford to take some risks because I have a number of sources of income streams from working for the Misericordia University, my pension from where I used to work, my other investments. So, with different people have different wants and needs. And as we'll see in this course, the people that work for corporations in finance are constantly developing different investment vehicles to try and meet those varying needs that are out there in the marketplace. We'll study, I don't know, chapter 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. We'll study about risk, and there's two types of risk: market risk and systematic and unsystematic risk. The market has really been pummeled the last 2-3 months. It was up around 36,000. I didn't see today was closed. It's a holiday. It's, I think, down around 31,000. So yeah, it lost 1/6 of its value in the last 3 months, 16%, 15, 18%, somewhere in there. But not all stocks lost. There are some, the market overall. And when you see the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it's a very narrow scope of 5 industrial, 10 transportation, and 5, I forget the mix of it. But it's not like the Russell 2000 or the S&P 500, which are a way broader index, looking at a lot of different stocks. There are some companies that do good in poor times. Tobacco companies and breweries, alcohol manufacturers do good when times get bad. Most things go down, but there are certain stocks that go up when things get bad. It reflects human nature, I guess. In addition, managers may not always act in the best interest of the firm, especially if they have a compensation package that is tied to specific benchmarks or goals. They can actually manipulate the options allowed to them under generally accepted accounting principles to try and make the company look a little bit better, look like it's doing a little bit better, and thereby push its price up or sales or whatever the benchmark is, so that they can get their bonuses or exercise their stock options or what have you. And they're looking out for their own interest over the interest of the investors, the shareholders, which is the agency problem. Okay. Beat that one to death, I hope. All right, number 2. Firms often involve themselves in projects that do not result directly in profits. For example, Apple, which we featured in the chapter introduction, donated $50 million to Stanford University Hospitals and another $50 million to the African aid organization Project Red. That's all caps, capital R, capital E, capital D, a charity fighting against AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. Do these projects contradict the goal of maximization of shareholder wealth? Why or why not? Well, 50 million here and 50 million there. Even in my little simple brain, I can add that up to 100 million. And, to Apple, that's not a whole lot. Last time I checked, they were sitting with over $500 million. That's $500 million in cash on their balance sheet. They have a problem of having too much cash. And the thing here is, what are they doing? They're making the company look like they're socially responsible, donating to these charities. They're getting some positive press out of it. How do you measure these things? I don't know, but there is a positive impact to the company. People will think of them in a better light and maybe go and buy their products. As far as the hospital and the charity for Africa fighting with AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, you keep people alive, you're going to have a larger market. Those people are possible customers somewhere down the road. I remember if you ever see the TV commercial with a sled of a Mercedes-Benz going into a brick wall. Mercedes developed that thing to study safety things in their vehicles, and they patented that, but they allowed other companies to use it without paying a fee. And you would say, well, that's kind of stupid management of Mercedes-Benz, Daimler-Benz. And not really, because they're foresighted. They're looking at the long road. And they figured people can survive a car accident in a Hyundai, Yugo, Fiat, Toyota, Honda, whatever little smaller car. And when they're in their 20s or 30s, and as they move up the economic ladder, maybe they will be a Mercedes-Benz customer someday. So Mercedes has an interest in keeping people alive, making cars safer, because maybe someday those people will buy a Mercedes-Benz. All right, so the public image may not be as a direct impact as the advertising of their product, but it puts the company's name out there, and it puts it out there in a good light, building what accountants would say goodwill, making the company a more responsible citizen of the world, I guess. And it would make it's a marketing ploy of one sort, and it probably makes the board of directors feel good that they're donating to worthy causes, and it would increase revenues down the road, again, keeping people alive. You see their name on the building. Every time you drive by it, it gets reinforced with you subliminally, day in, day out. People say, oh, that's the Apple wing of that hospital. I just wish that they would give some money like that to Misericordia University. Stanford may not need all that money, but again, Stanford's a big name. All right, 1-3. What is the relationship between financial decision making and risk and return? Would all financial managers view risk-return trade-off similarly? I can tell you right off, the second part is no. People that work in arbitrage on Wall Street are big risk takers. They lose big. They also win big. You want to win more than you lose, and keep your job and make money for the firm. Almost all financial decisions involve some sort of risk-return trade-off. The more risk the firm is willing to accept, the higher expected rate of return they require for that investment. Okay. Why do people put money in banks? To get 1% right now, you're losing to inflation. Well, they're afraid. They're afraid of the market. We'll see later on this semester, one of the chapters coming up, there's a table that shows over the last 90 years that the stock market has returned 10.5, 10.8% over the last 96 years. Now, that's not consistent every year, 10%. Some years it goes up 18 or 20%. Some years it goes down 12 or 15%. In fact, I was talking to a financial guy the other day, and he says, hey, the market's down 16%, but I'm doing pretty good. You're only down 8%. So he's managing my money well. He's minimizing my losses when the market suffers a downturn. Of course, maybe the way he has me structured, when it takes off, I won't get the 24%. I might only get 15 or 18%, but that's the way you invest your money. You sit down, you talk your risk tolerances, your age, your wealth, and a whole bunch of other factors. What about companies that put a lot of money into inventory? And this inventory is something that may go, uh, let's take iPhones, for example, that go obsolete or near obsolete very quickly. And, a phone that was $1,000, $1,200, when they come out with a new one, they can't give them away. Is it useless? No, it still works. Um, but it doesn't have all the new bells and whistles. And I think some people, like to have the latest one just as a prestige uh, badge of prestige. And you know, I got a my phone is I don't use an Apple. I use an Android. I guess mine's about 4 years old, maybe five. About time for a new one. Um, let's see what else is there on this. Again, talking about inventory, the optimal order quantity. If you're a retailer, inventory management is key to your organization. Too much inventory, you have excess money tied up on product on the shelves that's not moving, not giving you a return. Too little inventory, customers coming in looking for something, can't find the size or color they want, they go somewhere else and buy it from a competitor. So there's a risk. Too much, too little. Uh, it doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. It just means that you made a less than optimal decision. Okay. Again, are you willing to take that risk? And if it pans out, then you sell the new hot product. If you don't buy enough for your Christmas season, if you're a retailer, then you lose out sales, you lose revenues, you lose profits. Okay. So risk return trade off. Lower risk, you've got to be satisfied with lower returns. High returns, you probably have to take a little bit more risk. We'll see that in that chapter I mentioned. There's a chart about the stock market over the last 90, 95 years, whatever it is, 96 years. They also do a comparison of different types of investments with small stocks, mid-cap stocks, large stocks, bonds, and bonds don't perform as well as stocks do over the long run. But they're safer. So there's less risk with bonds, but you're going to be happy. You're going to be happy that you're going to be getting something. Even when the market goes down, the market of bonds sell in the secondary market, and we'll get to that next in chapter 2, secondary market. Um, Bonds go up and down in value, but regardless, they pay their dividend as long as, or I'm sorry, not dividend, they pay interest as long as they're not in default. Okay, a corporation can always suspend a payment of a dividend. Dividends are not required because owners are not uh, don't have to be paid anything. Bondholders are creditors. The bond is a contract. The company is obligated to make that interest payment. Yes, companies do default on bond payments. In fact, with this Ukraine-Russian deal, Russia was going to default because a lot of the other people that bought their bonds, the companies in other countries that bought Russian bonds, said they have to be paid in dollars or gold, the interest. And Russia, because of the mess they got themselves into with the Ukraine, said, no, we're going to pay them in rubles, thereby violating the contract. And some investors, creditors said, well, you can't pay it in rubles, but if you do, you're in violation of the contract, and it will be considered a default and force them into redeeming the bonds prematurely. And I guess Russia is probably having a little cash flow difficulties about now. So let's take a look at the mini case here. The final stage in the interview process for an assistant financial analyst at Caledonia Products involves a test of your understanding of the basic financial concepts. You are given the following memorandum and asked to respond to the question. So whether you are offered the position at Caledonia will depend on the accuracy of your response. And let's see what I say. I'm not going to read the other stuff there. Let's see. A, what is the appropriate goal for the firm and why? Well, we already know that is uh, the goal of the profit is an accounting term. And if you know accounting as well as I do, I'm an accountant by trade, or even though I'm retired, trade and training. You probably had some accounting 101. You've had 3 or 6 credits in accounting. I've had 30 probably, plus 40 some years experience, 50 years experience. Um, there are options under generally accepted accounting principles that have an impact on the balance sheet and the income statement. So what options alternative management chooses can have an impact on the financial statements. So accounting profits, as our authors allude to, is a not an exact science. And they say it's a little bit too simplistic because it's on the accrual basis of accounting, and they say cash flows are really what matters. Okay, so just because you sell something, you sell it on credit. If we remember chapter 8, I think, or 7 of our Accounting 101 textbook, we know that there's such a thing as bad debts. When we make sales on account, there's a chance that people may not pay us. They can default. They could have a fire, a flood, or just go out of business, and we're stuck. So our authors are economists, and rightly so. They view things, the goal of a firm, as being maximizing shareholder wealth. Okay. The market value of the common stock. Grow the company, make the company bigger. Like I said, think of it as a basketball or a beach ball, and you want to start having good management and good decisions. You're inflating that ball and making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Yes, you own 10% of the company. I like a lot of the sayings of the former Yankee catcher Yogi Berra. Sometimes you would think he's not very well versed in English, but he went in a pizza shop one time, and the guy asked him, he asked for a medium pizza, and the guy said, "Do you want me to cut it into 6 slices or 8?" And Yogi said, "You better make it 6. I don't think I can eat 8 slices." Well, it doesn't matter. A medium pie is a medium pie, 12 with 14-inch diameter. Doesn't matter if it's 1 slice, 2 slices, or 20 slices. It's still a 14. If you own 10% of the company and the company grows, your 10% represents more assets. Like I said, they pay. Most companies pay dividends. Some companies don't, and that's fine. We'll talk about that in upcoming chapters. It's the cheapest way of financing because you're replowing the profits and the cash flows back into the business, and you don't have to pay interest or dividends. So it's the cheapest way of financing is to retain earnings, self-generated profits or self-generated financing. Again, the decisions of management are reflected under the efficient market theory that markets are generally right. People in charge of the company running day-to-day operations, if they're making good decisions, the market will note that and tend to push the stock price up. Bad decisions, on the other hand, will force the stock price down. Okay? So it's an auction market, the stock market. There's a limited number or a finite number of shares for a company's stock, so supply and demand have pressures, upward and downward pressures. But again, if nobody wants it, the price is at $10. The price is going to drop to 9. And nobody wants it at 9; it'll drop to 8, so on and so forth. Okay, the opposite is also true. If it's people are buying it at 10 and you got a lot of people buying it, well, the price will go up to 11. 12, 13, 14. All right, let's take a look at B. What does the risk-return trade-off mean? Well, simply put, it means that investors will not put their money in a risky investment unless they are compensated for taking the additional incremental risk, the additional risk. In effect, the return investors expect is made up of 2 parts. First, they receive a return for delaying consumption, that is, making an investment. 2 things you can do with money. You can invest it today, or you can sit on it and invest it or spend it at some point in the future. First, they receive a return for delaying consumption, which must be greater than the anticipated rate of inflation. Second, they receive a return for taking on added risks. Again, that's why you do better in the stock market than you do with bonds, and you do better with bonds than you do in the bank. Okay. 3 different investment vehicles: a savings account in the bank will be paying you 1%. Bonds probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5% right now. And stocks, like I said, they've been hit pretty bad recently. But again, it's an opportunity to be buying because over the last 90 years, you'll see the trend. It zigzags up and down, but the overall trend is upward and to the right if you plotted it out on a graph. Okay, so if 2 investments present themselves, people that have a higher risk tolerance may go for the riskier investment in the hopes of having a greater return, a greater reward paid to them. And that doesn't always pan out that way. More risk, there's more risk that you're going to lose it. And again, that's where the trade-off comes in. There's a offer or a potential of greater profit given the greater risk. C. Why are we interested in cash flows rather than accounting profits in determining the value of an asset? The firm receives cash flows and is able to reinvest them, which cannot be done with accounting profits. Again, a lot of accounting profits may be tied up in receivables. Yes, you sold something, but you didn't receive any cash for it yet. So you can't replace the inventory, you can't update your equipment, you can't do anything until you convert that receivable into cash. In effect, accounting profits are shown when they are earned rather than when the money is actually received, cash in hand. Unfortunately, a firm's accounting profits and cash flows may not be timed to occur simultaneously. For example, capital expenditures such as the purchase of a new plant or piece of equipment are depreciated over several years, with annual depreciation subtracted from the profits. However, the cash flows associated with these expenses generally occur immediately. Large cash outlay at the front when you buy the asset's going to last you 5-10 years. It's going to generate revenues for 5 to 10 years, so you don't have that matching. It's so important. If you do have cash inflows from that asset, they can be reinvested, and the cash outflows that involve paying out money. Therefore, cash flows correctly reflect the true timing of the benefits and costs being expenses of financial decisions. Cash inflow, cash outflow. Again, why would you invest in a $350,000 bus if you're a bus line? Well, hopefully you're going to sell tickets and take people down to Philadelphia, New York City, or wherever they want to go, Atlantic City. And over the next 5 to 10 years, you'll recoup the cost of the bus and then some. Yeah. No guarantee. D, what is an efficient market and what are the implications of efficient markets for us? In an efficient market, information is impounded into security prices with such speed that investors have no opportunity to profit from publicly available information. Everybody's on the level playing field. The information comes out simultaneously. It's available to all players in the market, and thus they react in kind. Okay. That information is reflected on the stock price. Okay. Good news, the stock goes up. Bad news, the stock goes down. No news, the stock stays where it is. People process information. What is this going to mean? And again, a lot of that, a good example of that is what's happened with our gasoline prices. They're going up and down. If you look at the cost of crude, the price at the pump is way higher than it should be given the cost of crude right now. Yeah, we should have an increase because the cost goes up. But what people are doing, the people that trade the futures, are looking at July, August, what's going to happen then. Because what we're buying oil for today and you sell it as an oil company is, you refine it and sell it at the pump, you're going to have to make enough to repurchase oil to replenish that inventory in the tanks in the ground at the gas station. And you're going to, if the price is going up, you have to build that in now so you'll be able to afford to buy the crude oil in July and August and September. Again, it's what people think is going to happen. Nobody has that proverbial crystal ball, but that's what pushes prices up and down. If we didn't have that, prices would never change. So given that we have an efficient market, or nearly efficient market, we can implement our goal of maximizing shareholder value by focusing on the effect each decision has on the stock price. And if we hold everything else constant, that's what I was going to say before about the economists. They have all these very intricate, complicated things, and everything's related in the world and in economics. Yet they say, let's hold everything constant and change this one variable and see what happens. Well, it's not very realistic. Of course, economics is a very theoretical as opposed to a very practical science or art, it may be. E. What is the cause of agency problems and how do we try to solve it? Agency problem occurs when an agent is like a manager or someone acting on behalf of the investor. Owners take action that is not in the best interest of the investor. For companies where management is separate from ownership, managers may make decisions that are not in line with the goal of maximizing shareholder wealth. To control this problem, the shareholders monitor managers through oversight by the board of directors, theoretically. Trouble is, a lot of corporate executives have shares and they have influence on the board of directors. They may even have a seat on the board of directors. Okay. And they may try to align their interests of the shareholders and the managers by various contractual means. Redner's supermarkets, there's one up in Pitts, and there was one over in Edwardsville that closed up because they kept getting flooded. They're out of Reading. They are employee owned and operated. The Redner family started it, but as you work there, I forget what it is, 6 months or a year, you start every payday, they give you a share or a fraction of a share, and it makes everybody that works for the company a owner of the company. Now, yeah, there are people that are there longer, and the family owns more shares than the person recently hired. But again, there's something there that people are going to work and approach their work differently if they have something in the game. If they have an investment in there, their owner, they're going to do something a little above and beyond what the requirements are. Okay, they're going to have a little bit more pride in what they do, and they're going to think about, they're going to be nicer to their customers even if they're having a bad day. Let's see. The interests of shareholders and managers can be aligned by setting up appropriate compensation packages with stock options, bonuses, and perks that are tied directly to how closely management decisions coincide with the interest of the shareholder, which is maximization of the firm. Maximization of the value of the firm. F. What do ethics and ethical behavior have to do with finance? Whoa. Everything. It's a lot of it is built on trust. Business transactions and interaction is based on trust, and there's no way that the trust can be eliminated quicker than through ethical violation. Okay. Hold on, I have a phone call coming in. I'll be right back. All right, I'm sorry. I apologize for the interruption. Where were we on the part F, talking about ethics. Um, One of the hardest things to regain once you lose it, if you can regain it once you lose it, is your reputation. Um, and people in business uh, have their own culture, their own um, what's the word I'm looking for? Their own community. Somebody acts unethically, it gets around. Uh, they, they play at the same golf at the same country clubs. They belong to the same fine dining clubs. They vacation in the same areas. They bank at the same banks. People talk, and you hear stuff. Um, History has showed us this has happened with a bunch of people. Uh, Ivan Boesky. Uh, in fact, if you remember back in 2016, if you're old enough, uh, then running for President Donald Trump was going to get him to negotiate with the Chinese because he was a hard-nosed guy. He was a corporate raider, Ivan Boesky. Michael Milken with Burnham Money took the junk bond market. He ended up in prison. Uh, Salomon Brothers were collapsed. They did some unsavory things with repurchase agreements called repos. They were booking in sales. It's actually a loan, and they had to go to England to find a law firm that would sign off and say, "Oh, hey, look at the Enron scandal. The black guy on the accounting profession with Arthur Anderson, forced Arthur Anderson out of business, out of existence, because they violated one of the most important things in auditing, and that's auditor independence. They had their um, Anderson consulting arm. Uh, they were getting $1 million a week, $52 million out of Enron between their consulting and their auditing fees. The auditing fees were about half of that, and the consulting fees were about half of that, 52 million. And they went by the letter of the law, violated the spirit of the law with the special purpose entities, the 3% rule. They went to 2.99, 2.97. So they were technically in compliance with the 3% rule, but they did it so in such a volume and with the intent to, and basically what it was is off balance sheet financing. And it was a house of cards, and it all fell in on itself. Okay, WorldCom was another one. Bernie Ebbers. In fact, my old broker, notice I said my old broker, recommended me WorldCom as an investment, and I lost my whole investment in it. And Bernie Ebbers was the president, and he was the first corporate executive to actually get prison time. Up until that time, when they committed fraud, the corporation would have to pay a fine or be blacklisted and barred from doing certain activities. But actually, he was sentenced to jail. I forget how many years he served. But they would take expenses and capitalize them. That is, they instead of reporting expenses as expenses, they were recording them as assets. So you take expenses off the income statement, and you're going to show greater net income than you really are generating. And it's a double whammy because you're recording assets that don't exist. They're expenses, and they capitalize them and put them on the balance sheet. And those companies, WorldCom came about. It was basically McGowan Communication. Monsignor McGowan. We have McGowan Hall on campus. His brother founded MCI Communications, McGowan Communication Inc., which merged with somebody to become WorldCom. Again, those type of actions, Enron was so blatant and so widespread, it caused not only the collapse and bankruptcy of Enron, but also the collapse and bankruptcy of Arthur Anderson, the accounting firm, auditing firm. Salomon Brothers is gone. Their auditing firm had to pay fines. Boski, I forget what happened with him. But again, Drexel Burnham Lambert was Michael Milken. He ended up in jail. He got so big in the junk bond market, he was handling both sides of the transactions, the buy and the sell side. For people would call him on a Thursday and say, "Hey, I need a $30 million loan for a week," and he'd get it for them over the weekend. And he was, if you're representing the buyer and the seller in any transaction, you have a inherent conflict of interest. You can't serve both of them equally well. So, again, the question talked about ethics and trust. There are certain companies and people that just figure we're going to do our best, and they're usually successful. And they're successful because their reputation is solid, and people know if I go there, I'm going to get good product, or I'm going to get good representation. If it's a law firm, or if it's a doctor, or he's got a good reputation, or she has a good reputation as a skilled surgeon, and people are going to be lining up to go to those people because they have that trust. People do good work. Other companies are more motivated for that quick buck. They're focused on sales, 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 not so much on delivering a good product. They just look for volume. And what happens to those companies? Those are the flash in the pans. They come and they go. They don't get the repeat business. It's amazing with Lexus automobiles. Almost everyone that buys a Lexus is going to buy another Lexus and stay with Lexus year after year after year after year. Why? They treat you, number one, they have a good product, good quality product, and they treat you very nicely. Yeah, all it is a fancied up Toyota, but they treat you better than they treat their Toyota customers. And they hope that maybe someday you'll graduate from a Toyota to a Lexus. And the same thing with the Honda and Acura brand and the Nissan and Infiniti brand. They're building a brand. Well, you build a brand. If you act unethically, or even an employee acts unethically, it stains that brand and it cheapens the brand. So you can do a lot of harm, or your employees. One employee can do a lot of harm by acting unethically and tarnishing the brand that a company works so hard to get up there to be number one or number two in an industry and look to as the leader in that industry, and then somebody does something and it all crumbles like a week-old cookie. All right, so that about does it for chapter 1. So hopefully these answers coincided with yours. Like I said, I'll try. I don't know. I have a very busy week if I'm going to have time to get to give you individual feedback. So if not, this will serve as feedback. You can look at it, compare it with your answers, and hopefully I'll be able to get a couple at night for the next several days. Thank you, and good night.